All right, so the VBA quick reference sheet just gives you a little bit about, kind of some of the ways you refer to different workbooks, worksheets, cells, and ranges here. And it gives you kind of some ideas. But the main thing that we're covering here is the idea behind objects, methods, and properties. So let me take just a couple of minutes and talk you through that. It's a good sheet. I encourage you to kind of, download this, go through it in preparation for your exam, which is, incidentally, week from tomorrow here in this room. The time is posted on Learning Suite, so go look on the very last row in the schedule and you'll see the time. It's here. It's a 3-hour exam right here in class. The TAs tell me you'll need all 3 hours to do what you're going to do for that exam. Okay, so it turns out that VBA is what we refer to as an object-based language, meaning that a lot of what we manipulate in the language is through the use of objects. Oh, back in the 1980s, programming kind of first popular. And when I was a student here, I took my very first class in object-oriented programming. The language was C++. Towards the end of the semester, I realized I've been through this whole class. I still don't know what an object is. And it's object-oriented programming after all. Well, you're in luck because today I'm going to tell you what an object is. Are you ready? An object is a thing. That's it. Object's a thing. Hey, woohoo! It's anything that we can manipulate through VBA. So if you think about Excel, what might be an object? Think about what could be an object in Excel, a thing that we can manipulate in VBA. A cell or a range, a worksheet, a whole workbook. These are all objects. There's lots of objects. A chart is an object. The axis of a chart, the title of a chart, everything's an object. Everything is an object. Object just means thing. Now, objects have two characteristics that are critical to what we're dealing with. One is that objects have properties. Property is just some value that describes how the object is, what the object is like. It says something about the object. Let me just open up Excel. I think I have downloaded it, but I'm going to go ahead and just open up the workbook that we're going to be on today. For this little part, I'm just going to be in the immediate window, but let's just take a look. So I'm going to open up Excel. It's going to open up, I hope. There we go. I'll go to my code. Alt F11 just will pop open the code window for you straight away. It's kind of nice, Alt F11. And get my immediate window showing, if I can. Oh, that's right, it's floating. There's something definitely wrong about the way my mouse works on this computer. Anyways, my immediate window. Okay. So here's a reference to a particular cell. Let's just say cells, and then I could say, I don't know, row number 4, column number 2. All right, so that is a reference to the cell itself, to the object. That object has all kinds of properties. And so if I say dot after that and say value, then I'm getting to there's a property called value. There's actually a property called value of the cell. What do you think the value property of that cell is? Row 4, column 2. Yeah, ALGT. I think that's the ticker symbol for Allegiant Airlines. Now, here's a thing about. Let's do a different one. Let's do instead of that one. Let's do. I guess right here. That's row 15, column 3. I'm sorry, what's the question? How do you get the immediate box? That immediate window, if it's not showing, you've got the code window open? Which code window is it? So it doesn't really matter what's showing in the background here. The immediate window is independent. And Control G will show that, or you can say View Immediate Window to show that window. And I'm not really sure you need to follow this along with me. You're probably better off just focusing on what I'm saying and just trying to grab it. So we're not building on, this is not going to be something we're building on for later in the day. Okay, so the value of row 15, column 3 is going to be 44.32. That's the value. Now here's the problem. A value by itself is not an instruction. And that is true of all properties. The property of an object is never an instruction to the interpreter, to the program that's trying to figure out what we're talking about here. If I told the interpreter this, it would be like me talking to you. Tell me your name. Eric. It'd be like me talking to Eric and going up to him and saying 44.32. Is that an instruction? Does he have any idea am I telling him to do something? Now, if I was telling that to the TA, they might think, well, in the context of grading the midterm exam, I'm supposed to be trying to get us to an average score of 44.32. There could be some context around that, but and humans might try to figure that out, but the computer's not going to do that. And that is true anytime we have a property. So a property can never just stand by itself as a statement. I've got to do something with that property. So what I could do is I could say, I want to print that property. I could say print that property, and then the interpreter knows what to do. Or I could change the value of the property. Instead of printing it, I could say, I use an assignment statement. Instead of 44.32, I'll put 44.33. And if I execute this line, then it should take that value, it should take this 44.33, plug it into that property, and I should see it change over here. So keep your eye right here on row 15, column 3. I'll execute that line, and that changes the value. So there are other properties besides value. So let me go ahead and do a print. Oh, incidentally, does that even make sense? Can I print this? It's like combining both printing and assigning. Turns out I can do this, but as soon as I say print, it says, oh, this is not an assignment statement. That's an assertion of equality. This then becomes either true or false. What is that, true or false? It's true. Yeah, that's exactly what it equals right now. So if I tried to print that, it would say that it's true. Hey, that's fancy. Okay. So I could print the value, or there's other properties. I could print the address. There's all kinds of properties. I could print it has a property called font. And the font has a property called name. So I could print the name that font, is in. There's like dozens and dozens of different properties here. If it's something that's a formula, let's take a look at this one. Let's say I'm going to make this cell here is going to be that one times 2. So that's now row 17. So I'm going to change this to 17 and ask for the value. What's the value going to be? 88.66. But it also has a property called formula. And that will tell me what's the formula in that cell. I got lots of different properties. So that's what a property is. A property is some characteristic of the cell. Sometimes I can change a property by writing to it. Some properties are read-only, but it's just information that describes the way the object is. So objects are things. Properties are characteristics of things. And I use them. As you can see, there's lots of things I can do with them. The second characteristic of objects that's critical to us, that's talked about in this reference sheet, is a thing called a method. So it says methods here. It talks about it here somewhere. Okay. A method is actually an instruction to tell an object to do something that it knows how to do. Whew, that seems like a weird thing to say. So objects have values that are just properties telling you the way they are, and they're smart. They have code built into them that knows how to do things. For example, one of the things that I can tell a range object to do is I can tell a range to select itself. Built into the range object is code that knows how to make itself the active cell. So if I want to make B4 the active cell, I can just refer to that cell right here, cells B, that's row 4, column 2, dot, and then there's a select method. Now, unlike properties, methods are themselves instructions. It's an instruction that's built into the object. So I identify the object, and then I say which method I want to execute of it, and that one then will make that the active cell. Did you see it? Let me highlight something else. I'll execute this line, and it's going to activate cell B4. I am literally telling I'm saying cell B4, go select yourself. That's what I'm telling it to do. What I'm not telling it to do, I'm not saying, well, there's some other select instruction somewhere that I'm applying to B4. No. B4 has built into it the knowledge. It has the capability to make itself active. I am telling it to invoke its own functionality. If the functionality is not already built into the object, and I want to do something with it, I have to do it a different way. But this is saying, hey, this is built into the object. And so that's a method. And the method can be a statement all by itself. identify the object, and then tell it which method. I don't have to say it equals something. I don't print it. I just say, that's an instruction, go do it. Kind of get the feeling for this? This might become a little more comfortable as we actually do some code with it, which we're about to do. So let's go ahead and jump into it. TAs, anything to talk about? Doing okay? All right, so we've got here the airline industry report. And in fact, it's very similar to what we had before. I've changed this, so instead of being what happened while the market was closed, I've changed it to show just what happened while the market was open, and we're looking at historical data. So the button that we worked on last time we were together was this summarize. That summarize button should still work just the same way it did before. It puts the percentage change, says whether it increased or decreased or remained the same. Okay, so what I'd like to do now, and we ended up, the thing we did last yesterday was the idea of a loop. We spent most of our time getting this first line to work, and then we pretty quickly said, now let's make it happen for multiple ones of these. So let's review a little bit of the loop, and we're going to extend that loop to make it a little bit more complex. And we're going to do that in this idea of clear data. So there's a button right here, clear data. It's not hooked up to any procedure yet. You may notice that if we look over here into module 1, that we've got something called clear data, but it's not, there's no code in it yet. We've got a sub-procedure already built here, so we're getting ready to work on that. So here's what I would like to start off doing. Oh, question. Oh, TA to the rescue. In fact, TAs, maybe you could sit to where you're facing or kind of move around. That'd be great, because we're going to probably start needing some help here before too long. Okay, so I would like to start by saying, I want to delete, I want to clear off that cell right there. Let's just start off by saying I want to erase cell C4. So here's how we do it. You got a TA, we got some help right here. All right, so I'm going to identify that cell with the cell's property, C-E-L-L-S, open parenthesis, and I'll put the row. The row I want is 4. The column I want is 3. And then I want to say its value is equal to, and then we'll just say a zero-length string, quote, quote. So that's a collection of characters with nothing in it. That is exactly what an empty cell is. It's just blank. Okay, so far so good. I should be able to run that. Whoops. Oh, value is spelled a little bit wrong. As it turns out, spelling is quite important. V-A-L-U-E. The shortcut to run that, by the way, the keyboard shortcut is just F5. So if you hit F5, that will run the code where your current insertion point is. All right, well, folks, here's the problem. I've got all these cells to do. Now, I could write a statement that refers to that whole range and then set the value property to blank, and I could wipe it out with one statement. There's two problems with that. The first one is it doesn't teach you about loops, which is what I'm trying to teach you right now. But more importantly is, if I'm looking at this worksheet, I could completely see the idea that someone might say, you know what, we've got another airline stock ticker that we would like to add in to this. They want to come in here and say, all right, we're adding a new stock ticker. Or I want to take away some of these stock. I want to get rid of one of these out of the, maybe one of these airlines goes out of business and it's no longer part of the analysis. So if we have the range hard-coded, then it can't figure out when to stop. It's already there. I'd like to be able to write this in such a way that the VBA looks at what's there and decides when to stop deleting. And so to do that, we're going to make a loop. I'm going to build the loop underneath this, and then we'll integrate this line into it here in just a minute. So let's just remember what the loop looks like. Incidentally, if you're looking at the videos on My Educator, you're going to see 3 different kinds of loops. Those are great, and those are helpful. I am going to teach you exactly one kind of loop. It is the most powerful loop. You can do anything with the do loop that you can do with all the other ones. The other ones are a little more elegant for some specific things, but the do loop is the all-purpose, going to get the job done loop. And that's the only one we're going to spend time on here in class. It's the only one you'll need to do the stuff that we're having you do for the exam. Remember, here's how the do loop works. The keyword do says, this is the beginning of the loop. The keyword loop says, this is the end of the loop. Remember, don't hit run right now, whatever you do. I mean, if you did this, you'd have an endless loop. There's no way out of this loop. Remember that when VBA starts running a loop, it puts its head down, and it says, I'm just going to do this as fast as I can. To give yourself some protection in case you accidentally make an endless loop, you're going to add one word just before the word loop. What is it? Do events. Do one word, no space, E-V-E-N-T-S. All do events does is it tells the interpreter, hey, you know, I might have something else for you to do. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and don't run this yet. I'm going to run this one myself. I'm going to save before I run. I'm not quite sure this is going to work. So I'm going to run this. Now you'll notice up here in the taskbar it says running. If I was to look at my performance on my interpreter right now, I've got like, 4 cores on this machine, and they're multi-threaded cores. So it's not going to max the processor out, but it's up here pretty good, like at something like 50%, 40% of my processor. What's it doing? It's running this loop. It's the vast majority of what's eating up the incredible processing power of this machine. It's running this loop as fast as possible. Now, because I have the do events in here, it's going to listen to the click that happens right here. When I click on this pause button, it's going to go, oh, you want me to pause? And it will let me interrupt the loop. Watch what happens to my processor. It should go down precipitously. I don't know what else I got going on in there. It's probably a virus. Oh, I'm recording video. Yeah, that would do it. Okay. So, but the point is, with the do events there, it's going to listen to that button. If I don't have my code window open, if I hold down I'm just in Excel and I got myself into an endless loop, hold down the escape key and it should do the same thing. But those will only work if you've got do events in there. Just put it in every time. Save yourself. Okay. So now I'm going to give myself some control. So let me think about what I'm trying to do here. What I'm trying to do is I want to go down as long as I've got a stock ticker. So as long as I've got stock tickers here, I want to delete this data out of here. And so let me start off just by figuring out how could I write something that will go across this range. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a variable. I'm just going to call it R. Dim R as an integer. So R is going to be an integer. That's great. And now I'm going to set it to the value I want it to start with before my loop. R equals 4. It's going to start at row number 4. I'm just going to use it to keep track of what row I'm currently thinking about. I'm not going to change the active cell. I'm not moving anything around. I just want to know which cell am I trying to refer to. And now let me just do a debug.print so I can see that I've got it going on. Debug.print of cells R, 2 dot value. So what I want to do, I'm trying to get this to print all these tickers. And then stop once it prints the virgin error ticker. All right, so I should be able to run that. Let's think about what's going to happen. R is going to be 4. Says, hey, beginning of the loop. We execute this. It's going to print something out here to my immediate window. I'm going to say do events. So it's going to go nothing else going on. It's going to get to loop, back to the top. And then what's the next? So it's first going to print Allegiant, the ticker for Allegiant. What's the next thing that's going to print once it gets here? Yeah, it's still going to print Allegiant because I haven't done anything to change R. R is never leaving 4. So to control this loop properly, I'm going to tell it R equals R plus 1. I'm going to give a new value to R. What's it going to be? Its old value plus 1. All right, so now it's going to print Allegiant, then Alaska, then American Airlines, then CPA. And then is it going to be good? Is it going to stop when it gets to VA? I haven't given it any reason to stop yet. And the condition to stop, again, I can put either at the do on the line with the do or the line with the loop. I'll put it down here with the loop. I will loop until some condition is true. I want to loop until until the column with the ticker on the current row, its value equals a 0-length string. So folks, if you ever find yourself in the situation I am right now with a yellow line highlighted, that means you're in break mode. The program ran to some certain point and then it stopped there for some reason. In this case, because I hit escape. When that happens, or because I hit the pause button, when that happens, you can always just hit the reset button and that'll stop your code and then you can run it again. And so now that loop just runs across and it prints these guys off. That's fabulous. All right, so I want to make sure that we're getting to this point before we go on to the deleting part. If you're not quite here, but you're close, that's fine. If you're not quite here and you're not sure why it's not working, get your hands up and let's get the TAs up to help you. Some TAs here up in the very back. Another one. One over here. Go ahead and pause and help folks get up to speed. All right, so now, instead of just printing off the ticker, I wanted to delete the data in this first column. Well, I've already got a statement that clears that, so I'm just going to bring this in. Right after I do the print, I'll bring in the line that sets the value to blank. Now, I have to make one change to this line to get it to work across all the rows. What's the change? What number do I have to change to something else? That 4 has to be R. So the first time through this loop, R will be 4. That will delete row number 4. We'll add 1 to it. Next time through the loop, R will be 5. Next time through it, checks to see, hey, is it blank? No, it's not blank, and so forth. So I should be able to run this now, and it should clear off that column. There it did. I don't really need to be doing the debug.print. That was just for me to see that it was working properly, so I may just comment that out right now, that I can see that it's actually doing the deleting. Now, problem is, I've done just one column. I have a couple of approaches. One is that I could say, well, let's just duplicate this line 5 times. And do it for column 3, column 4, column 5, column 6, and column 7. And that would do the trick. But anytime I see myself with a bunch of lines that are really similar to each other, and the difference is just like a number that changes one to the other, that's totally a candidate for a loop. Don't you see it? If I just had a variable that was changing here, I could have a loop that would do that. Now, it'd be a little bit strange because putting a loop in here is going to take just as many lines as it takes to delete by hand, but we're trying to get some experience with loops. And so we'll get one line that does the deleting, and we'll build another loop around it. So you'll notice here I'm changing the column 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let me come up here and declare another variable. Let me just dim C as an integer. And now right here where I'm doing all of this stuff, instead of doing those individually, I'll make another loop. I'm going to start from 3 and go to 7, so I will say C equals 3, do loop, do events, C equals C plus 1, loop until C is greater than 7, and then I will put my delete, my statement that's doing the clearing right there inside this loop. Row and column now are both variables, and I can get rid of these others. So what I have here now is a loop within a loop. It's called a nested loop. And I may just give myself a little bit more indenting so I can see it indented in a compelling way. I'm not sure that's really compelling, but that's what we get. So let's just think about how this executes as we go through. We start here, R gets the value of 4. Beginning of a loop. C gets the value of 3. Beginning of another loop. It gets confusing for me to have 2 loops. The interpreter, not a problem. 2 loops, 3 loops, 12 loops, no sweat. So the first time I get to this line, what's the value of R? Value of R is 4, value of C is 3. So the first time this executes, it's row 4, column 3. That would be that cell right there. C now gets added 1 to it. C is now 4. We check to see, is C greater than 7? It is not, so we stay in the loop, and this sends us back up to here. C has been changed to column number 4, so the next time we execute this, it's row 4, column 4. C gets incremented, it's still less than 7. Next time through, it's row 4, column 5. Row 4, column 6, row 4, column 7. One more time through, it's row 4, column 8 that we get to here. And so C then would be greater than 7. It lets us out of the loop. R goes from 4 to 5. We're still, don't meet the exit condition here. We're back up to this loop. C goes back to 3. We hit this again. R is 5. C is back to 3, then to 4, then to 5, then to 6, then to 7. R goes up again, back here. C goes back to 3, 5, 6, 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. R goes up by another one, C goes through across that range. This is an extraordinarily common pattern that we'll see in Excel, is to have a nested loop, because oftentimes we've got to go across an arbitrary number of rows and an arbitrary number of columns. Question? Could I have it reversed and go across the columns first and then go down and go across the next? Absolutely, yeah, I could change the order of these and it would work just fine. The only question is, does it delete down and then down and then down, or does it delete across then move over? Either way would work fine. Yep, absolutely. Okay, questions? Disclaimer here is that this is a whole lot of code to delete that range. There are easier ways to delete that range. But what I'm after here is getting you some practice in this idea in a pretty simple example of nesting a loop inside of a loop. What's that? Yeah, we could, yeah. No code necessary. You could just click and delete. But the whole point is, we want it to happen, click a button, and this will be part of what happens, kind of on part of a larger picture. And plus, we don't want to have to think about making the user delete it, because that user might come over here and delete the tickers too, and then we're in trouble, because we don't have a way to regenerate those tickers. All right, let's go ahead and attach this sub-procedure to the Clear Data button. Attaching code to a button is a breeze. Watch this. Right-click the button. It says, oh, you probably want to assign a macro. It gives you the choice. It's on the menu, assign macro. Yep, I want to assign a macro. Here's all your macros. Oh, it's called Clear Data. That's the one. We say, OK. I got to click off the button because it's currently selected. But now when I click on it, it's just going to run that macro. It's ready to run. Now that there's a thing tied to it, this get data macro, there's the button, there's no data tied to it. So when I click on it, it doesn't do anything. It just selects. But now that Clear Data is programmed, it doesn't select it. It just runs it. OK, questions on this nested loop? All right. The next step, I tried in the morning class, and it was a disaster. And so I'm going to have you watch me do this. And I have put the code that you'll need to make this next leap, but I don't want you to try this along with me. There was just too many students that had problems on their computer getting actually to the web query. So if you end up you're not going to do this for the exam. It's like for your personal edification. What we're about to do is we're about to make this worksheet say, you know what? We want to go get this data for a particular day. User, you tell us the day, and then Excel will go and ask the internet for the data. Specifically, we're going to go to finance.yahoo.com to this URL, and we're going to pull that data down. So we're going to do that with what's called the Web Query Wizard. Again, just kind of sit back and watch this part. I'm going to create a web query, and I'll record myself doing it. So I'm going to turn on my macro recorder, developer, record macro. I'll call it macro 1. That's a great name. Now, the web query is available on the data tab. I'll choose data, and then depending on what your resolution is, it might be showing, or you might have to expand this group. But I'm going to data in the external data group here. I'm going to get it from the web. Ooh, I need the URL, so stand by for a second. I'm recording all this stuff. I need to get the URL on my clipboard first, so let me copy this, and then let's try that again. Developer, record macro, macro 2. Try it again. All right, so data from the get external data from web. I am now going to paste in that URL and click go. It's going to make that request over here to the historic pages of finance.yahoo.com. So built into Excel is this web browser. It is not a very good web browser. It doesn't quite know what to do with this certificate. I haven't seen the certificate before. Proceed? Yes, I guess so. Do you want to continue running scripts? No, no, and no. The fact that it's still asking me is troubling. This was the problem that some of my students had this morning. I didn't have it. It might be a Windows 10 thing, darn it. Yeah, yes isn't going to help. I'm going to try to put that X right over the button that's going to stop, and I'm going to try to double click. Let's see. That didn't do it either. I said it wasn't very good. Okay. Yeah, no, yes isn't going to do it for sure. I mean, I've been there. I've been here before. So stand by for just a second. Let me try import. There we go. That imported. Now, it's asking me, here in a minute, it should ask me, where do you want to put that data? And I'm going to put that data right here like in K1. Now, if I was able to actually get past that little box first, I could have told it I don't want the whole page. I want just a part of the page. And that's the code that I've got for you here in just a second. But I'm going to say OK, and it's going to request that data, and it's just going to drop all of that data right here on the page. So I should be able to kind of look through here and find all that numeric data. Here's the data I'm looking for. It has the open, the high, the low, the close, the volume. That's the block I'm after. OK, I'm going to stop my recording now. So the point is that I can create this thing called a web query. Let's go look at the code that it generated. Alt F11. It put it in a new module called Module 2. And this is it. It says it's going to create a new web query. So it says, with whatever the active sheet is, it's going to add a new web query. And here's all the information that it takes to do that. It's got to know the URL, finance.yahoo.com, on a particular month, day, and year, and a particular ticker symbol. And then this other information. Where is it going to go? What's its name? Which part of the page do you want? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all here. So this is the code that it takes to create a web query. Now, stand by for a second, and we'll see if this code that I've actually put for you will work on your machine. So I'm going to close Module 2. And if you look at the very bottom of Module 1, you've got a sub-procedure called web query. And it looks really similar to what we just had there, except instead of having the URL hard-coded, it's got a little statement here that will read the URL off the very last value in column 1 right here. So it's going to find the value that's here, and it's going to read that as the value for your web query. So let's just see if I'm hoping it's going to work for you. Let's take a look. Let me delete this one that I've got here. And so I should be able to come back here and just run web query. And that should bring that data just in here to the top. Let's see if it does. Okay, so now it has brought the data that I need for that particular stock ticker specified here. It just brought it right here onto this page. So what I'm hoping that you're able to do is just run. Oops. I think I made a chart when I was trying to go to my VBA. Alt F11. Just run web query and see, does it bring in this data onto your page? How many of you did it actually bring that data in for you? Okay, so it looks like about half. What did it do? For those of you that didn't get it, what happened? Just nothing? Or you didn't try it? You printed it but didn't look so good? Okay, so this part is not going to be critical for the vast majority of the next part that we're doing today. But here's the idea. Let me take this forward and you'll be able to work along with me, whether that worked for you or not. Is right here, if we look at this URL, this is what's going to get us to that page. Let me just copy that and bring it up inside a browser. So this is the page that we're actually trying to get Excel to fetch the data from. So right here in this table has the information that I'm after. So for Southwest Airlines, on the date that I specified, October 30th, for Halloween 2015, that's where it opened, that's where it closed. That's the data I'm trying to get here. Now, you'll notice this URL that gets me this is something hideous. What can you see in this URL that looks familiar? Yeah, you're seeing the ticker. What's the computer looking for here? It's actually looking for love, which is kind of sad for the poor computer. But that's the ticker symbol. So that's the ticker symbol. Now, what is this? Now, notice this. This URL has parameters. Look at them. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They're not semantic. They don't mean anything. They're just placeholders. So they can get the data into the web server. So let's see if we can figure out what these mean. First of all, what's the day that I'm asking for? Okay, so which of these do you think deals with the day? Yeah, B is the starting day, and then E is the ending day. This is meant to bring back a whole block of data. I just want one day, but it's meant to bring back a whole block. So it's got a starting date and an ending date. What's the year I'm asking for? 2015. Do you see the 2015 in the URL? Yeah, there's the 2015. That was pretty good. And then we've got, let's see, what month are we looking for? October, so that's probably the 9th month. I guess that's right. Let's see, wait a minute. What? It starts counting at 0 for the month? Well, you know, they made it that way. We can't change it. We got to deal with it. So their month is off by 1. Let's just check. I'm going to change that from a 9 to a 1 on both places, and let's see if it brings back January. It should bring back February if we're right. Yeah, that's bringing back February. Is January really month 0? Yeah, January 31st. There we go. So the month is off by 1, but looks like the day and the year are right on the money. So here's what we've got to do. We've got to find some way to ask the user, what date do you want the data for? And we've got to make that URL. Ugh. Are you ready? Let's do it. So this next part, whether you got the web query working or not, we're off and running. Okay, we're doing good. So let's take a look at what that's going to take. So back to my code. I lost my code. I think I have code. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at the very top procedure called get data. Here's where we're going to get some data. Now, our first thing is we're going to see how we can ask the user to give us some information. So far, the only way we've asked the user for information was we assumed they were putting data in the right cell. Now we're going to see another way to do it. It's called the input box. We'll actually display up a box and ask the user to type something in. It's pretty simple. We're going to need some way to catch that, and so we'll put it into a variable. So step 1, I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to call it user date. Dim user date as a string. Just going to be a collection of characters. We're going to ask them to type something in. Now we're going to give that a value with an assignment statement. User date equals, and here is the input box, INPUTBOX. Open parenthesis. The prompt is, what's the message I'm telling the user about this dialog box that's going to show up? Now, I'm going to put it in quotes because I don't want Excel trying to figure out what I'm talking about, right? It sees user data, it has to figure out what I mean. Oh, a variable. It sees input box, it has to figure that out. Oh, yeah, it's a function, part of the language. I don't want to try to figure out this message. I'm telling you, it's just a collection of characters. You just put it where I tell you to put it. Don't try to understand it. It's not meant for you to understand, Excel. That's what the quotes mean. So I'm going to come here and say, enter the date for the data. Comma, the next argument that I'm going to give to this function. Title. I'll just call it historic data, again in quotes. Historic data. Next argument is a default. So the default here is asking, what do you want the user, if the user just hits enter, what do you want to be the result? What should this thing start with? Now folks, right here in D2, D2 is a merged cell, but D2 is the first one in it, so it's actually got a date. Rather than hard coding a date in there, let's just put the one that's right here, whatever it is. And so I can get to that by saying cells, row number 2, column number A, B, C, D, 4. And I want the value. Then I will close the input box, close the parenthesis for the input box. That should give me, when this line runs now, it should display up a message box, an input box, asking for the user to type something in. It'll have a default value there, and then whatever the user types in will be put here in user date. Let me do a debug.print with that so that we can see the result. Now at this point, I should be able to run this. If I want to, I'll go ahead and attach my Get Data button to it. So I'll right-click the button. I will say Assign Macro, Get Data, OK. Click off the button. I should now be able to click on this, and it should run Get Data. Here it's brought up the prompt, enter the date. Historic data shows in the title. The default is right there. I'll change it from 2016 to 2015. Say OK. And that should put that in the immediate window. There it is. 5/16/2015. So we've captured what the user entered here, right here in the user date. Okay, if that's not working for you, now's the time. Get the hands up. We've got a couple of TAs eager to help. 2 here in the back. 3 here. Let me come and help with that as well. There's 3 folks. Okay, so now we're prompting the user to type something in, and we've captured that in the user date variable. Here's the thing you got to realize: you can't plan on that user typing it in the way that it should be typed in. That user is going to type in something totally unexpected. Date, and they'll put something like my birthday. That's a date, but we don't know what their birthday is. I mean, actually, might type in MYBIRTHDAY. And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do a little bit of data validation. We've got to check to see what they've typed in. Here's the first thing. What happens if they delete the date altogether? A common thing. It turns out that deleting the date altogether is exactly the same as pressing cancel. So let's watch. Actually, it prints a zero-length string. It's kind of hard to see. So I'm just going to, you don't need to do this. I'm going to modify this so you can see it. I'm actually going to print the word user date, :space, concatenated with, let me just put a comma between those. I'll run this. The date is there. I'm going to hit cancel. I'll hit OK. And we can see it prints user date, that date. I'll run it again. This time I'm going to hit cancel. And now it's printed user date with nothing, zero-length string. When we hit cancel on this, it returns an empty string. It's exactly as if the user has deleted the thing off. We've got to check for that immediately. So right after we get back from user date, after we've collected it, let's say if, let's do this. If the length of user date is equal to 0, then we've got something going on. Let's just take a look at what length does. Len, L-E-N, is a function built into VBA. It just tells us how long the string is that it's operating on. So that'll just tell me how many characters there are in that set of characters. How many characters are there in an empty string? None. And so that comes back as an empty string. The length of it is going to be equal to 0. What do we do if the length is equal to 0? We're going to assume that means they clicked the cancel button. What should we do? Oh, show them an error. Your user will love that. I pressed cancel and it says error. You pressed cancel. It's not an error. They just pressed cancel. They changed their mind. They don't want to do that. That's okay. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to say exit, E-X-I-T, sub. Just get me out of here. All the stuff that's down here, forget about it. Jump all the way to the end, sub, and we're done. Just skip it. Now, if the length is something other than 0, it has to be greater. There's no such thing as a negative length string. So it's going to be greater than 0. There's some characters there. Then what do we want to do? Well, we just want to keep on moving. So it turns out there's nothing special to do in the case when this condition is false. In that case, I don't even need the else clause. So every time we've seen an if, there's a little bit of an else with it. But if there's nothing to do in the else part, you can get rid of it. Okay, so that's a really common construct. If this is true, then do something. Otherwise, just move on. And that's what we've got here. How are we feeling? So now, by the time I got to here, the user typed something in and pressed OK. So I'm going to put a little note for myself. The user gave me something. No telling what it is. Let's validate it. So there's several ways that we could look at that to see what the user typed in. Here's a great way. So I've got this date here. I'm in my immediate window just playing with this. There's a function called isDate, and it returns true or false if the string that's passed to it can be interpreted as a date. So it looks at 5/16/2016, and it goes, yeah, we can figure that out. We know what you're talking about. What about 50/16/2016? Is that a date? That's no date that I know of. That's false. And so this function isDate is built into VBA. I can pass it a string. That's what this user date is, after all, what the user typed in. And it will just tell me, hey, is that a date or not? And if it's a date, we'll know. If it's not, we'll also know. So I'm going to put another if statement here. If isDate. It returns true or false. That's what we need. If isDate, user date, then else, and if. All right. The tendency, remember that whatever we have between the if and the then has to evaluate to true or false. IsDate itself returns true or false. I've noticed that beginning programmers feel more comfortable if we say that. If isDate equals true, then do this, otherwise do that. This is going to evaluate to true or false. If it's true, this is going to say if true equals true, which is true. Or it's going to say if false equals true, which is false. So adding the equals true here doesn't do anything for us. But how many of you looking at it think, I like it there? That's okay, you can put it there. It's going to cost you in performance a nanosecond. The speed that it takes to add that comparison on is totally irrelevant. So if you like it there, put it there. That's fine. I'm going to take it out. Okay. Well, I'll put it back in. All right, so if it equals true, what do we do? If it is a date, that's good. We just kind of want to move on. So let's leave the part that happens if it's true. But what if it's not a date? What should we do? They typed in something that VBA can't figure out what date they're talking about. What should we do? We should probably let them know, hey, that's not a date. I couldn't figure out what you're talking about. Try again. We're going to do that with what's called a message box. Here we go. MSGBOX. Space. All right. The prompt that we're going to put here is just going to say, you know what? Hey, let's do this. Let's concatenate this string together. I don't think we've done concatenation. Let's take a quick look over here in the immediate window. I can, put a person's name, Nephi. And I can print out Nephi. There prints Nephi. Now, if I try to print Nephi and, hey, by the way, what is Nephi's last name? Anyone know? You're in luck. I happen to know it. It's Lehyson. Yeah, he's a Swedish. You never knew this. They're immigrants from Sweden before they went to Israel. Okay. So if I try to print this, oh, it doesn't like it. It shouldn't like that, darn it. It wouldn't like that over here in code. I've got to do something to glue these two things together, and the way I glue them together was with an ampersand symbol. And so that is just going to say glue these things together. So I've got a string concatenated, the ampersand symbol, with some other string. And that's what I want to do right here. I'm going to say message box, and I'm going to give them back their date. User date concatenated with, open quote, space, is not a valid date. Period. Comma, what's the style? I'm going to put critical, VB critical. And then the title. Users love it when you put this, user error. So that'll put user error in the top. It'll put some kind of warning symbol, and it'll say that their date's not a date. Let's give it a shot. Let me see if it works. Oh, and then what I want to do, by the way, after that, I'm done. Get me out of here. How do I say get me out of here? Exit sub. All right, I'm going to run this. I'm going to put a date in there. That's no date. That's Nephi. Nephi is not a valid date. User error. And I got a nice little X here. That looks great. And it lets me. So that feels pretty good. Okay, now we have kind of the opposite problem here. Now up here, we don't have anything to do when it's true. So what do? Just get rid of the else clause? No, because then it would execute when it is true. I have two options. One, I can just leave it like this, or two, I can reverse the condition of this, right? So instead of having this equal, true, I'll just make it equal false. So now I'm saying if isDate returns false, now I can get rid of the else. And now that will only execute when it's not a date. IsDate returns true or false. So when isDate equals false, that's we'll say, that was a problem. IsDate's not a date, or the date's not a date. Put up the message and get me out of here. How we doing, folks? Did someone say tired? We're tired. How many of you are saying, my brain hurts? For all this, it's not too bad. I got a couple of you up there. All right. All right, so at this point, once we get to this point, oh, wait a minute. I put this in the wrong place. So this comment belongs up here just a little bit more. All right, so at this point, what do we know? The user gave a valid date. And now we got a valid date. That's great. They gave us something. They didn't press cancel, and we validated the date. We know some great things now. We can assume that that's a date. And we can now ask Excel, tell me the day, tell me the month, and tell me the year. Remember, the URL that we've got to build out, we've got to extract out that month, day, and year. So let's create variables to hold those three components of the date. Come up here, I'm going to dim D as an integer. I'm going to dim M as an integer. And I'm going to dim Y as an integer. So day, month, and year, just D, M, and Y. 3 integer variables, just getting ready to hold those parts of the date that the user gave me. Here's the fabulous news. VBA has a function for extracting the day out of a date. It's got a function for extracting the month out of a date and the year as well. I don't have to do anything fancy. So at this point, I'm just going to say D equals day of user date. Day just extracts the day off of a date expression. I'll copy that 3 times so I don't have to type so much. I'll change the M to ask for the month and Y to be year. So at this point, I will have 3 different variables. They're all integer variables. One holds the day, whatever the user typed in. One holds the month, one holds the year. And here's the great news, folks. Even if the user types that date expression in some way totally unexpected, let's just see if this is true. IsDate. Oops. 27. Let's do this. Let's do it in quotes. January, January 27, 2015. What do you think? Is that a date or not? You think VBA can tell if that's a date? I don't know. Hey, it is. VBA could look at that and go, oh yeah, that's a date. So do you think we could ask for the month off of that date? Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, that's fabulous. I don't have to worry about, they put it in exactly the format that I want them to be in. As long as it's one of the many date formats that VBA can recognize, we're in business. Now, what do we have to do with the month? Yeah, we want that month to be backed off by one number. No problem, folks. Let's just say right here, whatever that month returns, we'll subtract 1 off of it. So now I've got the components I need to be able to build that URL. To put all this stuff together now, that was a hideous looking URL, wasn't it? Actually, it wasn't that bad as URLs go, but still it's a lot of work. So now let's go ahead and compose that into a URL that we could send off to the so-called internet to get the information. To do that, I'm going to declare another variable. I'm just going to call it URL as a string. As a sting. Ouch, that hurts. The 9 is silent. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and start this URL with the one that I know that works. So I'm going to come over here to I probably clicked on it. I don't really want to run it. I just want to get to that cell. And I'm going to copy it from the formula bar. I just want to get the text of this URL. And I'm going to start by saying URL equals, and let's just start it with what we had in there. So here's exactly the URL that we know worked. Now we got to make some big changes, but let's start with it right here. I have a couple of approaches that I can take to building up this string. One is that I could say, you know what? Let's take the first part of it right up to where the ticker symbol is. That's never going to change. Let's take the first part up to that ticker symbol, and let's start with that, and then we'll kind of iteratively make it something different. So we'll say URL equals everything up to here, and then we'll say, now the next line, URL equals what it used to be URL, concatenated with something else, and kind of build it out that way. Or I can turn it into a template. I can take this long collection of characters, and in the places that I want to put my different values, I can put some kind of a token that I will be able to find and replace. VBA has like methods for finding and replacing data. So let's take that approach. It's actually simpler. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, you know, right here where it says LUV, I'm going to delete the love. It seems so sad. Okay. I'm going to just get rid of that, and I'm going to replace it with a token that I'll be able to know that I can find and replace. And it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's not found somewhere else in the string. I'm going to put it in just like HTML tag. I'll put angle brackets, and I'm going to put ticker in capitals. Whoops. Come back, capitals. So all I've done is I've said exactly where it used to say LUV, I'm putting in angle bracket, ticker, angle bracket. There's nothing magical about what I've done here. It's still just a collection of characters. Later in my program, I'm going to say, look at the URL, find where it says angle bracket, ticker, and replace that with something else. I'm going to do the same thing for my month, day, and year. I'll just do those M, D, and Y. So right here, my 09, that's my month. Angle bracket, capital M. 31 is my day. Angle bracket, capital D. 2015 is my year. Angle bracket, capital Y. And I've got those same things again because this web page is expecting to give a range. And so my range has to start and end at the same place. So I'll do the same thing again here. So where my 09 is, I'm going to change that to a capital M. Where my 31 is, I'm going to change that to a capital D. And then I didn't quite copy it all. That's all right. And then the last part is going to be capital Y. If I were to send this URL over to Yahoo right now, they'd be like, we have no idea what you're talking about. Right? Because they're expecting numbers, ticker symbols and numbers. So this is just an intermediate form for me to work with here that says, I'm starting with it like this, and now I'm going to do a little bit of replacing. My TA is looking at what I'm doing with a furrowed brow. It has me a little bit nervous. You know, we're okay? All right. So now I've got the values that I want to plug into this thing sitting right here. Now let's just see what does it take to actually make that change. There's a function called replace. Let's just look at it here in the immediate window. I'll say replace, R-E-P-L-A-C-E. I give it some expression that I want to start with. Nephi, N-E-P-H-I, and N-E-P-H-I, was a prophet. P-R-O-P-H-E-T. Then it says, hey, what are you looking for? I'll say I'm looking for Nephi. Or maybe just Neph, N-E-P-H. And then it says, what do you want to replace it with? I want to replace it with L-E-H. That's going to find every occurrence of Neph in this string and replace it with Lech. And so it's going to print out whatever the string was, but find everywhere it says NEPH and replace it with LEH. So it found this NEPH here and replaced it with LEH. Well, I could have even left the H off, right? Because that H is the same on both of them. It just ran it that way and does the same thing. So it finds the occurrence you specify, and it replaces it. And it does them all. That's good news because I've got the capital Y in brackets up here twice. So I can hit both of those with one statement. So here's what I'm going to do. I've defined my URL. I'm now going to come here and say I'm going to change the value of the URL. URL is equal to replace. What am I looking at? The URL. What am I looking for? Capital Y. And what am I replacing it with? Here's the trick. What do I put right here? What do I replace it with? I'm trying to replace this angle bracket Y with an actual number that's the right year that the user gave me. Where do I have that right now? Yeah, it's in my variable Y. And so I just put a Y right here. You will notice this Y is not in quotes. If it were in quotes, VBA would say, we're looking for this, angle bracket Y. It would find it right here, and it would replace it with another Y. Because the quotes say, hey, don't try to figure this out. But because there's no quotes around it, I'm telling VBA, figure out what that means. And what does this Y mean? It means whatever the year was the user typed in. And so if the year was 2015, it's going to replace this in my string here with 2015. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the other three. Do the same thing for D and for M. Let's do a debug.print. Let's go ahead and leave user date in there, comma, let's put URL. If I run that now and give it a date, hopefully that's going to give me a URL that makes sense. finance.yahoo.com. Ticker I still have to deal with, but here's the month, here's the day, here's the year. Month, day, and year. That's looking pretty good. Questions? Get your hands up if you need help from the TA. All right. Whew, we are ever so close. Can we do it in the next 3 minutes? Probably not. Let's see what we can do. All right, so now we've got the URL established to everything we need for the date the user gave us. We just need to give it the right ticker. Trouble is, we got 12 different tickers. So let's make a loop real quick. So we're going to come up here and give myself a control variable, dim r as an integer. Dim r as integer. And I'm going to come right back down here now after I've got my URL defined, and I'm going to use that to set up a loop. R equals 4. We'll start off at row number 4. Do loop, do events. R equals R plus 1. Loop until, cells, R comma 2. Dot value is equal to a 0-length string. Folks, I'm going to encourage you to stop trying to follow along with me unless you are like lightning on the keyboard. I'm recording this. I'll post the solution. We've got just a couple of minutes. Let me take you through the end of this example. Until, it must be spelled correctly, U-N-T-I-L. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to just, at this point in my loop, I want to go ahead and write out the URL that I'm after. I'm going to write it in A21. And so I'm going to say range. I can do it with cells, or I can say range A21. Either one works. Dot value is equal to replace, looking at the URL, looking for ticker, and I want to replace it with whatever my current ticker value is, which is right here. So as I'm going down through this, I'm looking at one ticker at a time, depending on what the value of R is. I'm going to change the value here in A21 to have the ticker, to have the fully specified URL that I'm after. At that point, this procedure down here called web query actually looks there to pick up the URL it's trying to get the data for, and it will bring in that information. So I should be able to say, I've just written out that URL. Now let me go ahead and call web query. That's how I call one procedure from another. I just put the name on a line by itself. That's going to call and bring that data in. That's going to put that data, hey, maximize. That's going to put that data right here. Open is going to be in L, close is going to be in O, and I want to bring those over right here. And so, after I've run the web query, I'm going to say cells, row number R, column number 3's value, dot value. I'm writing to this cell right here, is going to be equal to cells, row number 2, column number L. And I can just specify the L there as I want. Dot value. I'm going to now write to column number 4, and that's going to come out of column number O. Once I've done that, I'm ready to delete that whole web query. It starts in K1. I'm going to throw this one at you kind of quickly. Range, K1, that's where that query is going to go. Ooh, let me just put it in here, and maybe we can talk about it next time we get together. Current region. That's like the whole set of contiguous cells. I'm on a cell right here. If it's connected by data, that'll refer to that whole set. I just want to delete that. Folks, I think that's going to be it. If I run this now, it should one at a time run that web query, bring the data in here, and pull that data right off of online. That's bringing in the real data for that particular day and that particular set of ticker symbols from the finance.yahoo page. I could then call it at the end, tell it to call summarize, and it would go through and run the summarization as well. And so you've got this now example recorded. I will post it for you online. That was kind of a lot to bite off in one day, but it's a neat example because it connects up to the internet, does this great stuff in Excel. It's fabulous. Will folks pay for this? Yes. You better believe they will pay for this. Thanks for coming. Class dismissed. Right after you hear Zach's closing comments.